proverb, I am because we are, is the foundation of the Acbn YouTube channel. Tap in for all of our remarkable content and ecosystem mobilization through the phenomenal practitioners and thought leaders we engage on this channel. In the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, things are not getting worse, they are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight to pull back the veil. Get ready for another amazing Acbn-powered interview.
Making it a financial gain for the big businesses, their competitive marketplace is shifting. It's not lowest price. Now, all of a sudden, the demand, the owners like Rosemary's talking about, pushing the demand side is the first step to get them to start to create new relationships. Because it came up this morning, Victor, in the social finance discussion, continual reference to the old boys network. You know, I've got my friends, I know where I invest. I don't have to go find new partners. Now, if we change the policy and say, you're not going to get points unless you have a diverse supply chain, those companies are going to go like, well, I want to win that bid. That's a $3 billion bid. I better change how I practice. And then we want to measure, we want them to report on that, not the social washing, but actual implementation of shifting how they do business.
Right. And what would that reporting look like?
I think it's very simple. Like what we're doing in the city with the city of Vancouver, we're working on a $2.5 billion hospital community benefit agreement. Every month, they have to report out. If they want to get paid in their invoice, they have to submit a report on who they bought their supplies and goods from, what their hiring practices were, how they engaged with community. So there's tools. It's called it's called you don't get paid unless you perform. The same way, you don't pay people if they, don't build the bridge, right? It's like, so it's just building it into the contract delivery is one of your requirements is build that, hospital on time, on budget with a social value. And you'll get paid if you do all three of those things. Come in on time, come in on budget, and come in on social value. That has to become part of the measurement of success when we buy things, whether it's a lunch for your meeting and getting the catering from a local Black caterer, or whether it's, who's doing your bookkeeping, or, any number of things in your supply chain. It's, let's open it up.
Yeah. And just final question, have you seen any resistance? And obviously we're not going to name any companies or anything like that, but have you seen any resistance in terms of these new policies and this new framework that companies have to abide by, and then just basically changing, it up from, the way things were done before? Have you seen any?
Absolutely. And I'll be careful not to name any names. But I think Stephen probably has better stories than I do about resistance. I know the first time in 2017 when social procurement came up on the federal level, I was on a panel with the Canadian Construction Association. And they just basically said, oh, we just learned about corporate social responsibility. We think that's a nice thing. And I'm like, it's 2017. Come on. This is corporate social responsibility was like 1990s. So the resistance was there, but as we change the value in the bidding, they're starting to figure it out because we've made it a competitive piece for some of them. And when we drive them from their traditional knowledge of this is financial, and all of a sudden they say, well, wait a minute, you mean I can have a more diverse workforce, I can have more dedicated workers, I can get more jobs because I have a social value? It is really that kind of, how do we use the micro levers to create the macro outcomes? And I think the strategies we're all trying to get into everyday activity are really driving a bigger picture, because as Rosemarie said, this is really about community development. This is about building community. It's not about trying just to make more money for a certain group of businesses. It's really much stronger than that. And so we have the tactics that we can use. But when people get into it, I think they start to understand the value and they start to see some of the outcomes. And we see a lot of the leadership, like in the construction industry, a lot of those guys started out not where they are now. And they start to think back, someone gave me a break. Why can't I do the same thing? So you look at people like, Tim Coldwell, the CEO, president of Chandos Construction, a member of the Mohawk Nation. He didn't know that at 17 when he got hired to shovel dirt. Now he's a leader and he's trying to open it up. So I think we're seeing the shift, but we do have, and it's, the innate, historic racism that you were talking about, Roderick. It's like we're not just changing procurement, we're changing a whole history of colonization, of institutional racism, of individual and societal racism. So if we were just dealing with procurement, I think it would be easy.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned, it's the colonial mentality that, sometimes there's a hand that forces it to change. And I think it's a great segue to our next question for Rosemarie. And in terms of resistance, but often countering that resistance with your persistence, what are some of the challenges you have encountered, Rosemarie, with TCBN, and how are you going about getting over those bumps, and when people or systems are resistant to introducing community benefits to the work that you're doing or that we're doing?
Yeah, with the 4 projects that we're now supporting, the Eglinton Crosstown, the Finch West LRT, Casino Woodbine, and the West Park Healthcare Center, one thing that continues to be a real challenge that we're experiencing in the implementation is the layers of subcontracting. So where the general contractor is able to themselves do the hiring or themselves procure the goods, they have a good track record. They're actually surpassing the 10% target that we had set.
Oh, great.
But yes, which is great. But you see, with the general contractors, depending on which one they are, the Eglinton Crosstown, they only hired or were responsible for 20% of the project. 80% was in the layers and layers of subcontracting. Similarly, with the other projects, not only there isn't even that 20% buffer, it's 100%. They basically subcontract everything out. And so the pushback that we get as community is that, there is contract law, and that prevents these general contractors from being prescriptive in forcing the hand of those subcontractors to be able to do what they want them to do, because at the end of the day, they can't control how a private business runs their operation. So we've had a real challenge being able to drill down all the way down to the subcontractors, and it's something that we need to work through. The other challenge that we've had is the inherent structures between the unions and the contractors, especially in terms of the procurement or hiring of contractors and workers too. So these subcontractors, and they're beholden, or they have a collective agreement with their respective unions. So whether it's if Black and McDonald, for example, I shouldn't call the name of a company, but I'm just giving it as an example. They are contracted to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and that's where they get their workers from. And so being able to go to the union and this contractor asking for specific type of workers, for example, there is a real challenge there to be able to break through, because they have a collective agreement that speaks to how the recruitment and intake happens, and how the dispatch of workers on the job site actually happens. And for example, if we are asking to procure a social enterprise to perform work that a unionized contractor would normally do, and if they're not a unionized social enterprise, and we have examples of that, and I'm just trying not to call names of companies, but there's a real challenge in being able to do so. You know, it's they can be ostracized, these you know, small social enterprises or minority-owned contractors, for example, because if they're not a unionized contractor, they most likely are going to be in competition with the contractor that has collective agreements with the different unions. So those are like challenges that we need to work through and to figure out some innovative ways for how we can kind of cut through that. And I can't say that I have any solutions at this point. I think we all have to get around the table and all the right stakeholders and have those kind of conversations and come up with some actual agreements that everyone can work towards.
And before we get to our question we have in the chat, I think one of the ways that you are cleverly highlighting some of those businesses and some of the larger businesses and unions who are excelling in diversity is by that diversity award that TCBN does annually. And I think it ultimately sets a precedence for other businesses and unions to follow suit in terms of the leadership that some of the, again, the ones that are taking the steps and moving it forward are moving in terms of just setting the trend and setting the pace.
Yeah,
So
that's what we're trying to do, you know, just in terms of, you know, there's the stick and then there's the carrot, right? How do we kind of generate, you know, some healthy competition with these major contractors? And so to highlight what they're doing well and to recognize them when they're doing well and to show it as an example for others to follow. You know, just recently, I think I will name this contractor again because
in a positive light.
Informally, yeah. So Dream Unlimited, for example, you know, we TCBN, we have a commitment for 10% on most of the projects we have, which is very small already. And we've been trying to push to get a higher percentage. Like we want to go up to, you know, the full reflection of the diversity of our city of Toronto, 50% or more being racialized. I mean, that's the ideal where we want to get to say that we're going to settle for 10% year over year when 10% was 9 years ago when we started with the Eglinton Crosstown. It's not realistic. But Dream came out and said, you know what? From our own initiative, we're going to go for 20%. We're going to go for 20% procurement, 20% hiring on our projects going forward. And they were never required by any government to do that. But I think they saw it as a competitive advantage. And that's why they took that commitment. And now, how do we roll up our sleeves as community and stakeholders in all of this and help to support them to achieve those goals? I think that's next level.
All right. Thank you very much for that. And a quick question from the chat. So do unions have incentives / leverage points? And are we, equity deserving groups, at critical mass in any union yet?
Yeah, and I don't see it yet. With the these, so we have 12 of the largest construction unions who are members of the TCBN, and they are committed to creating change internally within their structures. So, you know, we have the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Operating Engineers, Carpenters Union, LAUNA, 506, 183, etc. Sheet metal workers, Local 30, 12 of them anyways. And so the first year for the Eglinton Crosstown on our community, our Building Diversity Awards, we recognized LAUNA 506 because they actually achieved a 12% outcome on the Eglinton Crosstown project. So that was good. And we looked at what were the systems that they did in order to do that. However, Equity diversity is not just the Black community, right? So it's women and Indigenous and newcomers and such. So what percentage of these were Black, workers? I'm not fully sure. I can't actually give you those numbers, but they're doing a good job and they're going to keep doing better. And I know the Carpenters Union, they're one of, we recognized them last year for the Building Diversity Awards. And that's because in the middle of the pandemic, working with the TCBN alone, they worked with many other organizations and had similar outcomes. But they hired 250 people from TCBN alone. And most of those, I would say more than like maybe 80% were Black youth and Black, men and women who got an opportunity to register with the Carpenters Union. And the reason that they've been able to do so is because they actually have, there is leadership from the top, and they've also designated a director of equity, diversity, and inclusion in their union, and that's also unprecedented. So there's change afoot. And this person is a Black person. You may know him, Chris Campbell, and he's also the chair of the Toronto Community Benefits Network. There's change kind of percolating, at the bottom. We need to kind of turn up the heat and let it boil.
Absolutely, 100%. And we're glad that you're in the kitchen turning up that heat, Rosemary. Again, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go back to Narissa. Narissa, how do you think the stakeholders in the social procurement ecosystem can create a greater sense of belonging for all Canadians?
I think it's looking beyond just ticking off boxes, and we've seen for so many years, and I think David spoke to this, is corporations are being forced to look internally at their systems and their processes, because now it's not good enough for you to just tick your box. You have to meet certain quota in order to even be eligible for applying for tenders. But I think what we really need to see are companies embedding social value into their policies, and more importantly, creating an inclusive culture into their workplace. So I think it's really simple. I think if you want to create a sense of belonging, make sure you create a space where people feel like they belong. And how do you do that? You have to take the time to understand people and their cultures. And there's different ways of doing that. If you really want to invest the time and the resources to develop your human capital within your organization. And I think that there are wonderful organizations that do great jobs of doing that type of training. We've got BiSocial Canada. They offer social procurement professional certification, and that is helping the businesses and corporations to create social value within the culture of their organization. And then you've got organizations like SETSI, and they have one called The Art of Invitation, and that helps to establish culturally responsible approaches for building meaningful relationships with Black people. So I think it's all about really being meaningful and having intention around creating that inclusive culture within an organization, not just ticking your box and saying, oh, I've got, I'm just going to meet the bare minimum in order to be able to apply for or be eligible for specific tenders and opportunities.
All right, thank you very much for that. And we're going to ask Clement. So you spoke about some of the goals of the BIPOC Foundation, but if you had, I guess you could say, that ultimate list in terms of what you would like to see happen when it comes down to social procurement for the communities you serve, what would that be?
Thank you very much, Roderick. And I'm just going to re-echo some of the things that some of the other panelists have already echoed here today. And someone talked about the tool that tool to which some of this whether federal, provincial, or municipal governments can be held accountable to the level of access that is provided for diverse groups to become part of their procurement scheme, or even their understanding, the level of understanding that these government bodies or these government units have at all about social procurement. Believe it or not, there's still parts of the country where the topic of social procurement, even if we're talking, David was just talking about 2017. This is 2022, and it's still very nascent with some of these municipalities and some of these even at the provincial levels. So I guess we've talked about the demand side, even just an education as well on the supply side as well. I think is necessary. I think it's important. We're now just beginning. I want to say we've made a lot of advancement from where things were, say, 5 years ago, and but there is still an immense opportunity for improvement. And this is what I would like to see: municipal governments, provincial governments, actively chasing and actively wanting and actively creating an environment where that level playing field can be achieved, and doing all that is possible beyond policies, beyond ticking a box, right? We got approached, our foundation got approached a little while ago, by one of the organizations around the government corridors, and they wanted us to serve them and help them, bring them to better understanding when it comes to viewing things from the diversity, equity, and inclusion landscape. And by the time we started quizzing them, I started trying to have a deeper understanding as to what are you trying to achieve, because it's not enough to ask us a question or to tell us, hey, come give us an hour training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. No, we're not all about that. It goes beyond having a class. It goes beyond having a lecture. When we come to you to deliver that, we're going to bring tools to measure impact. And we need to begin to see those tools where the impact of these conversations can be measured, and we can begin to truly see data that shows that clearly signifies the shift that we want to see. And to answer your question, that is what I like to see. I like to see a clearly measurable and impactful shift from where things used to be to where we want it to be, as far as creating an inclusive and level playing field for social procurement to thrive.
Brilliant, my brother, brilliant. So what are some of those measurables? I mean, I know you can't get into everything, but give us an example of something that can be measured in terms of whether that be through the diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, on how we could see that some of these governments or companies or unions are actually meeting the goals that they set out to do, or their objectives. What are some of those measurables that we could look at?
Well, I see a situation where the data points that some of these bodies currently are used to collect data can be expanded. For instance, a little while ago, we engaged one of the universities, around this region. We asked them a simple questions: how many Black students do you have in your institution? And there was no answer. They have absolutely no clue. They've never thought about it before, right? And we have, immigrants paying international fees and bringing in all this money into this institution, but nobody really cares about, if you don't know how many they are, so how are you really planning for them? It means that you don't specifically have plans for them. You're not planning to include them in, the opportunities that are potentially cropping up within that institution, but you are very happy to take those fees, right? And it cuts across, all the verticals and horizontals as well, right? And We want to be able to see those clearly. When you say diversity, equity, and inclusion, or when you say underserved population, we want you to go a little step ahead and create even just further the delineation. We want to see how many of these are women, how many of these are Black, and we need to loosen up that lump when it comes to talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we want to see those additional data points. And I hope I've answered your question.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And again, on the great work that you're doing and keeping people accountable. There has to be somebody on guard watching and monitoring and having these conversations, because it is so easy for things just to revert back to where they were. And, again, thank you very much for doing all that you do.
Thank you.
All right. And we're going to go back now to Stephen. So as the leader of ACCA, how do you feel that anti-Black racism and an existence within the reality of this environment or this society that we live in, how do you feel that anti-Black racism has impacted Black contractors and their ability to even enter the social procurement space?
Yes, good question. I think Clement had mentioned something on this, where, and also David, a lot of contractors, Black contractors especially, if they go to a bank, if they go to bid for a job and they get rejected, it's in such a way that nobody tells them why or how, and they don't go back. They say, okay, that's it, they give up, and just go and work underground or work one small job that they can do themselves and don't grow the business. That is one of the issues that we have. The growth, the fear or the rejection really cements in their mind, and they just want to stay put and the status quo, and they don't even want to grow or even think about it. We have a lot of members that you ask them about going to a bank for a loan, first thing that comes to their mouth is, I hate banks, right away. Mm-hmm. So in construction, that's a very normal thing. So there are organizations that is helping now, but although I'm not going to call any names, but the organizations that are supposed to help the Black community in construction, and there's a lot of talk, but no action. We need to, as everybody's talking about measurement, some banks come up with these programs. Well, what are you doing? Let's measure it. How much money are you giving out? How many Black or BIPOC companies have you helped? Let's talk about, let's get it out in the open, measuring. There is movement. It is slow, and they all seem to be, banks and one thing I'm talking about, they all seem to be fighting for the same thing and saying who could be better than others. I work with 2 banks, and one of them is a real pain. It's just, in construction, it's just gross. Looking for, getting to projects, bidding for, there is a big move now with some of the big companies in Toronto to allow for get more Blacks into procurement. There is a movement there, but again, it is very slow, and that's why we are trying to push our members to say, come on, let's learn how to do this. Some companies are actually coming to show our members how to do a proposal, how to get on a bidders list. So it is changing, and that's, as Rosemary said, we got to light the fire on the whole process to get it moving faster.
Right, and you mentioned, like, just in terms of even some of the contractors or the people that you work with, the mindset, it's not necessarily to see, procurement or, to do work with the banks and to secure different opportunities. How do you go about changing that mindset? Because it all, it starts ultimately with the mindset of the individual and also with the awareness. But how do you now get, them to think about, as opposed to just working underground, we're going to work above ground, we're going to have to get, our business plans and, all of our ducks lined up to be in like even to be in the race to be considered. So how do you go about that social transformation in terms of having people ready for that? And especially again, when they're working, on contracts and then, day in, day out, things are busy. How do you get that injected within the individuals that you work with?
This is one of the biggest problems that we have. We're 2 years old. And I think we realized this, we thought it was bad, but realized it's even worse. This is why the education and the training comes in. We have a grant that we funneling some money to actually help some contractors pay for a bookkeeping service. Well, let's hire an apprentice. Well, they don't have a CRA account. Okay, well, let's get one. So the way we are still growing, and we're still finding out how to do this better, but we have to give them tools to get the services that they need. They're on the field working, and there is some companies in the background doing some of those bookkeeping and what project management and safety for them, so that they can start growing and, okay, you finish this job, let's get another one for you. So support is the biggest thing that we have to do. The mindset, I think the only way we can change mindset is by showing some examples. So we get some winners coming in and we show that, hey, look, it can be done. I own a company in construction for 32 years now, called Bass Installation. I will say that we install glass on skyscrapers. Even by talking to some people and they see that, that's a big, oh, really? Oh, it's a Black person does this? Some workers come working for me and they don't know they're working for a Black person. You know, when they hear that, you go, wow. So that I'm trying to push to say that it can be done. Let's come on and let's work together and get it done. So yeah, it's definitely, we need winners. We show up some winners, and more people will jump on the bandwagon to get things done and grow their businesses.
Right. And I like the way that you spoke about, just in terms of the innovation, in the sense of some of the supports that you're providing for, these contractors that you're working with, like bookkeeping. And as we all know, bookkeeping is an essential, critical part of any business. But sometimes when you're on the ground, when you're, making sure that your employees are doing what they've got to do, bookkeeping may take a backseat to, getting everything done, and having like that collective, I guess, bookkeeping service, if that's what I'm understanding is correct, will obviously support and enable them to make sure that their finances and their accounts are all in order, because without that, obviously social procurement or procurement in any regard is going to be very, very difficult. So again, kudos to you, my brother, in terms of seeing, it forward and having those processes in place that will enable businesses inevitably and invariably to be able to move forward, because the foundation of what they'll need is there. So great work.
Thank you.
All right. So we're gonna go over to David again, and David, by Social Canada, as a leader in social procurement space, has recently made some significant progress with multiple ministries at the federal level and within municipalities. Can you share some of this work? And then you could just maybe share one or two examples in terms of some of that significant progress.
Yeah. So when we started by Social Canada, the first iteration was back in the early 2000s, and it didn't go anywhere. No, we didn't even know how to spell RFP. Nobody knew what social and procurement were oxymorons, and it took us until like 2014 to have the collaboration with partners internationally, like Social Enterprise UK, et cetera, to sort of have a framework to start to look at how we could influence the marketplace to create these opportunities to bring a social value. And our first target was the federal government, because they spend so much money and they have this mandate to create opportunities. So how could we bring together the social, economic, and the social value objectives, addressing things like homelessness, inclusion, employment for persons facing barriers, people excluded. So if we could bring together for government that they're spending money, and rather than just spending money on programs, why don't they use the money they're buying goods and services to actually create the social value? So we thought that was a pretty natural step. Again, as one of the early discussions we had with the federal government, someone said to me, well, if you think you can do that, David, do you have 10 years? It's going to take 10 years. Well, it took 9 years. So I feel really good that all of us working together, we shortened that. And I think now their challenge, as we're all talking about, is implementation. On the municipal level, it's quite fascinating. We're working, with communities coast to coast. I mean, I was just in St. John's, Newfoundland. We were talking to the Newfoundland Labrador government just a couple of weeks ago. We've been working with the British Columbia government. Municipalities, everything from Victoria to tiny municipalities across British Columbia, working together. Edmonton, Calgary, surprisingly, one of the leaders. I mean, if you go to the Calgary website and look up benefit-driven procurement, Wood Buffalo, the oil sands, go to their website and type in social procurement. They're trying to figure out how do we include Indigenous suppliers, because that's their big social inclusion challenge. And Toronto and Winnipeg, Peterborough, I think the municipalities are really getting involved because they're the ones really close to the issues. I mean, they're the ones trying to deal with homelessness every day. They're the ones trying to deal with, bringing equity to their communities. So they're getting it, but it's really, again, it's like we've got to move from the policy. We look at like Winnipeg, and it's amazing because most of these movements that are happening on the municipal level are coming from community. They didn't come from us. They didn't come from the mayor. They didn't come from city council. It's like Rosemary said, they came from community going and saying, how are you spending our money? You're glad to take our money in taxes, but we want to know, how are you investing our taxes back into community? So when community, like in Winnipeg, the Construction Association, working with the Chamber of Commerce, working with the social enterprise sector, working with the North End businesses, all saying, come on, spend your money to build community. That to me is driving it. I mean, because governments aren't going to initiate this. It's going to be community demanding that the money that is spent has not just an economic value, but actually is reinvested in building community.
All right. Thank you very much for that, David. And again, for all the work that you're doing and in education, and also not just speaking about it, but demanding it. It is very commendable. Thank you. We're going to go back to Clement. And then Clement, you've obviously shared quite a bit this evening in terms of the work that you're doing in Alberta. And how do you counter some of the resistance in forms of racism and access to equitable opportunity in the work that you do? What are your tactics in terms of countering that?
Thank you very much, Roderick. We live in Alberta, and I guess just first and foremost, understanding that these are some of the things that you must face, right? And having that awareness and equipping yourself with subtle ways, of letting people understand what is not the right way to do certain things, right? Is what has really helped me personally, right? In catering to some of these challenges. And what do I mean by that? I mean, for instance, I'm also the here in Lethbridge, that we have a local organization that I'm vice president for. We have an Afro-Canadian organization, and what we do in that organization is we begin to equip our people with the knowledge of the kind of things that they can see that pass as subtle discrimination or subtle racism, and how they can potentially overcome, or how they can the kind of questions that they can ask to put those people in a situation where they realize that what the comments that they have made, the subtle comment that they have made, is not appropriate. And we're also doing that at the foundation as well, just because I guess as we continue to grow, what we want to see is a world where these things are no longer conversations that we have to have, because everybody will come to a place of neutrality, everybody will come to a place of understanding, but it might be a long way yet before we get there. So just continuously letting our people know what those challenges that they can face and are, and how they can go about tackling them, and how they can, just with a simple kind response, change a bad situation into a good one, can, you know, create that pathway where people can begin to come to the understanding that, you know, even if, you know, we are in 2022, and that, you know, subtle racism and subtle discrimination should be a thing of the past.
All right. Thank you very much, my brother. And as we all know that, you know, it's one of the positions that we have to take of obviously in terms of leadership and of being people of color, in the sense that we have to have empathy. And even though we may be subjected to some of the inappropriate behaviors such as racism or discrimination, we also have to educate moving on. And so it's almost a two-tiered role that we have to take on. And again, it's not easy, but we commend you for that work that you're doing. Thank you. Okay, and we're going to go back to Rosemarie. So, Rosemarie, you recently finished your strategic planning process with our colleague and a remarkable colleague, Joe Mahivik. And are there any new important pillars in terms of the work that you're doing that we can expect?
Well, yes, thanks for mentioning that. We had a great 5 years. We did see lots of good movements and changes at all levels of government. We're having national impact, and we're realizing that there's a lot more opportunities that we've been leaving out in the private sector. So one of the big changes that we're going to be doing going forward is looking at how can we look at developing community benefits agreements with private development. And we're already seeing a lot of investment that's starting to happen in housing and social housing. And for us, it'd be great to see how we can work with our, you know, our young people, people from our communities to build their own housing. So we're getting ourselves involved there as well. So I think that's the main change. One thing that didn't change though is we decided to keep the Toronto in our name.
Okay, that's going to remain the same.
And that was an intentional and a strategic decision.
Okay.
Because there's so much happening in Toronto right now, massive spending for all sorts of infrastructure and private development. We have the Golden Mile redevelopment that is happening with over 32,000 housing units being proposed. We have Downsview lands that is being developed, and over the next 30 years, we're going to see a lot of activity. Similarly, just thousands and tens of thousands of housing to be built. And so, yes, we want to make sure that we have the capacity to be able to take on these projects. But for any organizations or groups or communities anywhere across Canada who wants to collaborate on community benefits, we share everything. So knowledge transfer is really important so that we can really build that movement.
All right, so it's not Vegas. It's not that everything happens in Vegas, stays in Vegas. It's Toronto, and we know we're sharing and reverberating all the best practices and critical information to all of our partners and our allies across the country, and even beyond. All right, thank you very much for that, Rosemarie. Narissa, so some final questions here we have for our panelists. In terms of your priorities and emerging projects, what would you like to amplify?
I think just the fact that we are really working to build the operational capacity of our Black-owned businesses, and I think that if we have an opportunity to leverage information that is out there globally, that we'll be in a better position to be able to empower ourselves, and that's why we built that tool, so that we can amalgamate the information, amalgamate all of that data, and then we can analyze the data to see historically where money has been spent. Is it in construction? Is it in services? Is it in goods? What type of goods in what provinces? And then we can use that information now to empower our members to say, okay, you know what? The government has spent this much money in this sector, in this province. Where are we? Do we have businesses in this space to be able to take advantage of that? And if we don't, we should be looking at doing so. You know, and what I want to see is more of us coming together as ecosystem partners to try to gather that information and build that information so that we can empower all of our Black-owned businesses across the country. So I think that is really one of the main points I want to drive is how do we use the data to impact and enhance the operational impact that we need to have for our Black-owned businesses.
And what do you find is the best means to amplify your messaging or your awareness in terms of messaging or communicating with the community?
Well, within our community, we have various ways of communicating, but I think what we need is amplification with purchasers. And we need them to know who we are and where they can come to get help and information. So what I would say is for those who are listening right now, if you're a purchaser, reach out to one of the organizations in your area who can help you with this. We are in BC. I mean, we can help businesses across the country and purchasers across the country. But if you need someone in your area, reach out to any of the members on this panel who are in your space. We have sources to be able to help you to diversify businesses, but more importantly, it starts with building a relationship. And if you don't know who we are, you don't know where to start to build that relationship. So I would encourage purchasers to reach out to us so that they can start to build the relationships with our businesses, so that they can start to do the business and do the work with us. We know that there's a lot of money in tenders, but there's even more money in the contracts that don't require an RFP. So you can start to have that type of supply chain transaction right now. It doesn't have to be the longer term vision. We can deal and work with small businesses right now who can fulfill the smaller contracts right now that don't require that type of tender process. And then for the suppliers, we reach out through social media, through email, through our ecosystem partners. But I think what I would say is, if you are ready for the next step, like we can't sit on the sidelines anymore. We have to take control of our own destiny. So reach out, let us help you. It's not just about procurement, it's about where you are in your entrepreneurial journey. We have wraparound services in all the spaces. Procurement is just one. If you're not ready to take advantage of the procurement program and tool, we can get you there. We have wraparound services to help with business plans, for strategic planning. It's an entire team here to help you start a business or grow your business. Wherever you are in that journey, we have services and support there to help you. And we leverage other organizations that have, so there's no point to reinvent the wheel. Use and take advantage of services out there right now that are actually working for the community. We have,
right.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Sorry, I thought you were finished there. Okay.
Well, I was just saying that we have a trade show, for example, coming up in June next year. It's a 2-day trade show. If you want to come and meet the businesses in person, sign up and come and register for that trade show. We also have a retail social enterprise here in Vancouver on Granville Island. We're showcasing over 17 Black-owned businesses right now are selling their product from that retail location. We've got 20 more who are on waiting lists to get their products in us. If you want to see things in person, come out and see things in person. But you have to start with the relationship building, and you have to start to get to know us and our members.
All right. Thank you very much, Narissa, for that information. And obviously, in terms of that call to action, getting out there to understand what's there and, how you could utilize the services that you provide. Rosemary, and I know we're a couple of minutes over time, 30 seconds for the rest of our panelists in terms of the calls to action. What do we need to do? What's that call to action that you could leave us with?
Oh, geez. Well, thank you for that really good question. I don't know. Call to action. We need to come together as a Black community and really, look at how collectively we can advocate at all levels of government to make sure that this is happening, and, continue to do the good work that you're doing in our local communities to help develop capacity to be able to take on the opportunities when they do come, because that's the worst thing for community benefits, is when we get out there saying we want this and they open up the opportunities and then we can't even deliver because we don't have what it takes to step to the plate. So that would be my call to action. Thanks. And I do have to run because I'm here at this event with the different counselors and trustees, all Black potential and now, politicians who have won their seat. And I just want to go and give them one last congratulations.
All right. Thank you very much,
you.
Rosemary Powell, for all the work that you do. And I'm sure we'll be in contact soon, but we commend you as a community for, being on the front line and putting us in positions of
Thank you.
power.
Lethbridge next. Clement, reach out. Okay.
All right. So we're going to go to Steve in 30 seconds in terms of call to action for Black contractors.
My call to action, I think we all have to work together. The Black community, some of it is segregated in the sense that they're fighting for through different lens. We all have to start coming together to go after the same thing. Let's all get capacity building. Let's all share information so we can move on. That's it.
All right. Thank you. Clement, your 30 seconds in terms of call to action.
Well, first, I would just thank the leadership of Victor Beausoleil and the entire SETSI team for putting together such an amazing event where we can actually discuss topical issues like this as it affects our community. Just like the others have said, I see an opportunity for collaboration, but even more intently, we need to begin to now begin to intentionally identify those members of our community that have potential and help them with the capacity to get to that level where they can begin to take advantage of these opportunities that are available. What do I mean? In our community, we have a lot of individual heroes, right? Individual winners. We need to begin to leave that mentality to a place where we understand that it is better for us to win together than to win alone. It is better for us to raise other champions so that we are not the only champions in our field. We don't need to climb that ladder and take the ladder away. We set up that ladder, set it up nicely, and get others to climb that ladder so that we can reach that critical mass to create the change that we want to see in our community.
Thank you very much, Clement. And again, thank you for all the great work that you are doing and representing us in spaces that we're often not aligned with. And we just, again, commend you for all that great work that you do. And please definitely do share your information in the chat for anybody who is looking to reach out to learn more about Lethbridge and the work that the BIPOC Foundation does. David, 30 seconds.
I'll do it really quick. I'm going to take your word, which was amplify. I'm going to take Clement and Stephen's word, which is collaborate, and just add my word, which is accelerate.
All right. Thank you. And Narissa, your 30 seconds. I know you gave us some call to action, but if you've got any last words in terms of that 30 seconds.
I guess it's just to collaborate, as Clement said. We have to work together as a community to build community. And I just want to say thank you as well to SETSI organization for convening this panel and this dialogue. And I appreciate the time that you've been given to let us tell our stories and how we're building the community and how we can all work together to do so.
All right. And thank you very much again for all the work that you are doing in British Columbia with Black businesses and community there. So again, we just wanted to thank all of our esteemed panelists this evening. As always, we strive to bring information and awareness, and not just to speak about it, but to action it and apply it. So we just wanted to thank SETSI for putting on this panel. And this information is critical for the growth in terms of our community, not just from the industries or the sectors that we represent, but from a community and having a presence, because we know that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And, obviously all of you this evening have provided great opportunity and information and insight for us to be actually sitting at the table and have these discussions. So in closing, again, we want to thank the panel, and we want to finish also by, again, acknowledging the stewards of the various lands that we're on, and we acknowledge our ancestors, and we acknowledge those who toiled without the compassion or the compensation. and the many forms of discrimination and racism that they faced. And we acknowledge them, we thank them, and we acknowledge all of the elders that the community and the stalwarts that we have within our context, and whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So on that note, we are saying good night, and we wanted to say thank you to all of our guests this evening who shared this evening with us on the Zoom. Thank you very much for your questions. And as we always say, just don't let it stay in this room. Spread it on the mountain, let it reverberate over the hill and everywhere. So thank you very much. Stay safe. And again, thank you very much to our sponsor, SETC, for putting this amazing panel on. Good evening then. Take care.